The content discussed in this episode is for educational or informative purposes only and should not be replaced by individualized professional consultations or professional medical advice. Hey guys, I'm Tasha.
Hey listeners, this is Guni.
And you're tuned in to Doctor the podcast, where we chat and explore all things on integrative medicine. So we have a super special guest with us today. He is one of the pioneers in bringing Ayurveda to the UK and an influential figure in this space. He is the director of the College of Ayurveda and president of the British Ayurvedic Medical Council. He has almost 50 years of experience as an Ayurvedic physician and a Pañcakarma specialist in the UK. So I shall say no more and just go ahead and give a warm welcome to Dr. Mauroof Athique. Thank you so much for coming on to our show, Dr. the podcast. We're super glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me for this discussion.
So I guess today we're going to be talking about, the cardiovascular and heart disease impact into the South Asian community. So I wanted to read a quote that said that according to a WHO report, by 2020, South Asians will comprise of 25% of the world's population, but will suffer over 50% of the world's cardiovascular deaths. So I think that's like an incredibly alarming statistic to read and concerning actually. Do you think that in terms of the cardiovascular health in the South Asian community, is it something that is prevalent in our genetics, or is it something that is caused by the environment? What is your take on this, Dr. Athique?
Yeah, now cardiovascular disease is one of the 5 biggest killer in the world, and among the Southeast Asian can be related both to the genetic makeup of that community, as well as the environment within which the community lives. Now, the genetic makeup is only a very small element, which is about 5%. And the 95% is our lifestyle, the way we interact, the way we relate to things, nutrition, and our exercise, sleep patterns, and all of these things are together, we lump it as a lifestyle. So now those are the environmental impacts. Now, the genetic component is something that we can hardly change. Now, the major cause that the Southeast Asian countries are with a very high rate of heart disease mortality is because they have gone through a massive change in their way of living. And that change has impact mainly both in their genetic component and in their adaptation. They have made a massive change in the way they consume their food, in the way they relate to the environment.
So when you refer to change, are you saying more about the immigration? So people who've immigrated to a country, that's the change that you're talking about?
That's one of the major current changes. But if you go evolutionarily, changes is when the conquests and the country was taken over by foreign power. And these changes impacted more. And then it sort of planted the seed.
Right.
So that migration also puts an effort into our normal routines. Now that plays a major role in creating disorders or diseases.
Right.
So that everything that we take in for our sustenance, for us to live, we have to eat. That's our first major important component that we take in. Second, we have to breathe. So we take the environment in. Thirdly, we had to interact with the environment. We had to relate with the environment.
Yeah.
Now, these 3 things are, when we are born, it's all genetically determined. So as we start living, these changes creep into our system.
Right.
So our bodies constantly have to adjust and change. And there is only a certain limit how much our body can change. So if it exceeds that limit, then there is a breakdown. In anything.
So we kind of touch upon the environment part. So could you tell us about the difference between what we are born with versus the 95% you were talking about, that is your environment, how you eat, the changes that are around you? The 5% is what you're born with. How would you qualify those things? What is it from?
Yes, it is what we call the genetic makeup, or the impressions that we get at the time of conception from both our parents. Now, these genes are impressions which can be turned on or turned off due to environmental factors. Right. Now, these in modern science we call as epigenetics, or these are switches which turns those endowed genes with which we are born. And that turning on and off, if it is in a regular harmonious pattern, then we sustain our lifestyle as we are, the diseases which is prevalent for that particular region or country or things that works out. Nature has a way of equalizing everything. And so basically nature is geared to preserve things, not to destroy things. It's man who destroys it. So when man acts against nature, he creates that sort of destructive influence even within himself. Now, our body is never still. Every second, thousands of interactions takes place.
Yeah.
Because our cells change, cells have to be repaired. We are all constantly thinking, we are breathing, we are acting, we are moving. All of this requires energy. Energy is a transformation of food that we eat and the air we breathe. The glucose from our carbohydrates go into our mitochondria. The air we breathe in go into the mitochondria, which produces the energy which is necessary for every single function in our body. Even thinking, even when we are sleeping. And that is what we call as basal metabolic rate. We are using energy. And then if we are using energy, is changing interaction that between the ATP, ADP, constant change. When that constant change is occurring at a very, very fast rate, there is always reasons for things to go wrong. And if we don't keep ourselves in harmony, in balance, now these things can accumulate. Our genes are made in such a way, we have what we call repair genes in our body, which can automatically repair any change, damage occurring to these inscriptions or instructions, information that allows things to happen within our body. If we keep eating rubbish, things that is polluted, heavily processed, too much of sugar, too much of salt, too much of fat. Now these are processed food. Every processed food has additives, preservatives, which are not part of the normal food. If you take a vegetable from your garden or from a market, it doesn't have within itself any preservatives or additives or insecticides or pesticides unless we put it into them.
Right.
Yep.
It's not part of the normal routine. So these additional things are the one this causes the disruption, that breakdown in our system. So it's first to clean up the way we eat our food. There's a lot of talk about vegetarianism or meat eating. It's not meat eating that is bad or good, or vegetarianism is bad or good. It's everything that what your body needs had to be simple, easy to digest, and easy to assimilate for the body to work with without much effort. If we put additional things into that, then the body has to do additional work. And that will be using more energy. Now, that is the sort of seed for any type of disease. As you just mentioned, I was a patient with a heart disease. Now, I come from Sri Lanka, which is a Southeast Asian country.
Yep.
I came here, I was about 25, 26.
Okay.
Now, I have been here for the last 50 years. So
That's a long time.
a third of my country is in my birth country, where my gene pool is. And I come 93% from Southeast Asia. And there is a little bit of variety from other Mediterranean countries.
Wow. So I have a question, Dr. Athique. You mentioned like genetic factors and environmental factors, right? And in the environmental factors, if you had to break it down to some degree, right, as an overall umbrella, what kind of environmental factors would contribute to enhancing or making your pre-existing health condition worse, or putting you in a position where it will be worse?
When I came to the UK, I had no heart conditions. I was perfectly a healthy specimen.
Right.
But the stresses, first is the nutritional stress. My whole diet pattern changed. I was eating McDonald's, I was eating Burger Kings and whichever I can get hold of. I have no time. I've been working very hard and things. My whole routine changed. And the second is the environmental impact. It's the stress that the change brings about. Then you come from one environment to another environment, you have that initial adjustment. Now, if you don't manage your stress, then the stress becomes disruptive, because stress, that is a very primitive reflex in everybody from our ancestors thousands of years ago. It is the same effect like in 1,000, 2,000 years ago. People were worried about the lions and the tigers in the jungle who is going to kill them.
Yeah.
Now, the worry, the stress is still there, the same stress.
But
now we are worried
different.
about our neighbors.
Right.
Yeah.
So how we manage that stress is very important. There are a lot of techniques that we can use to do that now with meditation, mindfulness, yoga, skills. But yoga is a whole philosophy of calming yourself, your mind, your outlook. Exercise is just physical work. So,
what do you think makes Southeast Asian men more predisposed for heart diseases?
one is the type of genes that cannot metabolize fat properly. So that tends to allow the fat to accumulate and get lined along the arterial walls and cause atherosclerosis and hypertension, high blood pressure. Now, high blood pressure is the first symptom of a heart disease. Anybody who have high blood pressure or diabetes are at a high risk for a heart disease or a stroke.
Right.
So that is our first, and a lot of our Southeast Asian people are also on the obese side. Now, obesity is a very big endemic, massively taking place all over the world. And this obesity is brought about mainly our change in our habit, our sedentary lifestyle, our eating patterns are changed. We eat on the run. We don't digest our food properly. And if you remember, if you look back at a time, when we eat, you always sit around the table. Always there's a family meal. Now we don't have that anymore. So the whole habit has changed. And unless these foods are digested, eating is not enough. It's not what is on the plate that is important. It's what's digested and absorbed into your bloodstream. That's where it counts. But if we don't give that time and the necessary space for that to happen, so if we are always on the move, or not concentrating on the food we are eating, so enzymes that is necessary to digest the food are not going to come in proper quantities or proper quality, and the digestion will tend to suffer.
Yep. I think the culture is that we have to be fast paced. And I remember reading something where they said if you're on the go and you're eating, it is one of the worst things you can cultivate as a habit, because your body is correlating stress and food as the very foundation of how your body is going to process food. So that really resonated with me. It made me realize how my habits for the last 5 years, for example, every morning rushing to the office in traffic, I'll be having a sandwich. That would be my breakfast rather than sitting and eating at the dining
consciously
table. Being mindful of the practice.
It's how we consume, how we give time for that sandwich to be digested. We are sort of doing 2 or 3 things at a time. So our body is not geared to do 2, 3 things at a time.
And you briefly mentioned that you've experienced some of those changes as well, and you've experienced yourself a heart disease as well.
So I started getting my blood pressure going up, and also we have asthma within the family. So when I went to the GP, they thought it must be asthma. Because whenever they did my cardiovascular, the ECG, they said, oh, it is normal, your breathing difficulties and your tiredness is related to your asthma. So I was on bronchodilators.
So you noticed that your blood pressure was rising, that already on its own. How did you recognize that? Were you already monitoring yourself?
No, first I was having headaches.
I
was feeling tired, I was having headaches. And then I went to have my checkup done. Initially, I didn't pay much attention. I just thought, oh, it's stress. And I do some yoga or meditation. And then Savasana was very good. I used to practice almost every day. It's a technique where you tense your body and let go. So you calm yourself. You increase your parasympathetic nervous system. We have 2 nervous systems within our body, which are automatic, which regulates everything what we do, apart from our central nervous system, which is voluntary. These are involuntary, and they have 2. One is a stimulator, one is a relaxant. The stimulator is the flight and flight syndrome, which is a protective mechanism. Which keeps us alert all of the time. So we are worried about the tiger behind us. So it keeps us ready for either to fight or to fly or to freeze. Now the other one is relax and digest. And so also we have, it's nurturing. It nurtures our body, it allows us to regenerate, recuperate. Now that is controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system or the vagus nerve. which controls every single activity that goes on in the body and it regulates, is that one. So by deep breathing, we stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system. You will always see when you are stressed, your breathing becomes very shallow, very rapid.
Right.
Yep.
So shallow breathing is of no use.
Oh, that's like a quote that we need to use. Shallow breathing is of no use. Because like, even if you think about it another way, shallow means also like without meaning, or fast-paced breathing has no use.
It applies for all facets of your life.
Exactly.
Anything shallow is not necessarily the best.
Because when we breathe in, the air has to go right into our alveoli, which are the smaller breathing tubes where air exchange can take place. So we need to really push our air down. And that's what we do when you do deep breathing or in pranayama, which is what we call diaphragmatic breathing. I mean, these techniques have been there for years and years,
For sure.
for centuries. But now science is rediscovering it and renaming it, validating ancient rishis or sages. So deep breathing is a very essential part. A lot of us, if you look at them, they're chest breathers. We need to breathe from our stomach. Even if we have to do 5 minutes, that's fine. That's good. At least something is better than nothing. You have to change slowly every time, every day, little by little. You cannot do a massive change. Change is something nobody can do all of a sudden. So that is the approach we need to use and try and change our habits slowly.
Dr. Athique, would it be bold for me to say that with this kind of concept for shallow breathing, right? For me, I feel like it's a direct link to cardiovascular health issues, because if they're not doing this on a regular basis, that means they're storing all this stress, which is contributing to the impact of how their heart is operating for their body. Would it be accurate to say that?
Oh, yes, certainly there is a link. It is the stresses which accumulates in our body, makes disease worse. But when we deep breathe, body gets rid of the excess fat which is accumulating.
So for that blood pressure to go up, so you've not been practicing that.
I was too busy.
You were
younger
too
days.
busy. You're too busy.
To do all that. I do a little bit of my meditation. That's useful. But then there was no choice. When it came to our situation, when there are structural changes, you have to go for chemical medicine. You have to go to take Western medicine. Your lifestyle changes are not going to change acute conditions. If you are in acute pain, go and see the doctor. After that, when your pain has abated, then rethink of your lifestyle, of the way of what you eat, how much of rest you are taking, how much of exercise. So it's what we say is prevention is better than intervention.
So it's interesting to see how you make the parallel between modern or Western medicine as like a chemical medicine, right? Because what basically you've been saying is that for blood pressure to be regulated, you needed, a pill, you needed modern medicine to intervene because it was acute, it was immediate, and you needed that as like somewhat of an emergency. But then once that is regulated, you want to go and see kind of how you lead your life and what are the things you overlooked for you to get to that situation. So it started with headaches. You saw your blood pressure was high. And what did you do afterwards?
Yeah, the blood pressure was high. And then we went to the GP. He wanted to put me on blood pressure medication. I was a bit reluctant. I was not a fan of chemical medicine, really. So maybe my fault. I sort of neglected the factors that contributed to the rise in blood pressure and causing cholesterol being deposited in the blood vessels. That went on. And then I had after the blood pressure, I had difficulty in exertion, when I get tired very quickly. When I walk a big long distance or when I climb up a hill, I had to stay for a little while, catch my breath. And when I went to the doctors, they did an ECG, but the ECG looked normal. So they attributed that to my history of asthma within the family. So I was treated for asthma. And then once we used to go on holidays back to Sri Lanka at least once a year or even. So one of these times, my wife and I, we said, okay, let's do a health check.
Yeah.
And then we went and had a health check in one of the hospitals over there, which is a good one. And they discovered that my blood pressure was too high, and have a look at the heart and then put me on the treadmill. They never did that to me in the UK. So I went on the treadmill and I collapsed.
Wow.
And they had to resuscitate me. And then he did an angiogram.
Oh, wow.
And on the angiogram, he said, you got 4 of your blood vessels supplying blood to your heart is blocked. You need to very quickly do something about it, either a stent or an angiography, or you're not going to survive. So I said, no, they wanted to do it there in Sri Lanka itself. So I said, no, I had to go back. I had to consult my family and everything. So when I came back, and within 2 months, I had my angiogram. All my blood vessels were replaced. And now it was surprising.
It's interesting how you're the one who had to bring it up to your GP. But I think that it's potentially highlighting the fact that kind of those predisposition or those patterns in terms of sicknesses for different ethnic backgrounds, where when you're going to see your GP, potentially he or she is trained in, the UK system. So they recognize the patterns that are more prevalent in their region. And so potentially for Caucasians, this is not something that is something that they learn to recognize. And so it's only when you were back in Sri Lanka where, this is quite common. And
that's a very important point to see, because you had to treat the whole person.
Right.
No use treating the parts of a person. No use treating because I feel tired or my breathing is not good, so look at the lungs. It has to become the whole thing, how I live, how I move about, how I eat, what stresses I have, what worries, how I relate to the rest of the environment, what pollutions are around me, what food I eat. All these are equally important. 20, 30 years ago, GPs did that. GPs knew everybody within the family. We had really a family doctor. He go to a medication, he will ask how is your parents and how is your brothers and sisters. Nowadays, the systems have all changed. Right. We don't have time. We can't blame anyone because it is, as we go more and more, we are aware of more disorders. Then most of the people who go to the GPs can do with some advice, lifestyle changes and things, not use the GP's time, where the GP's time can be used for other important areas. So now they sort of ration the way you have only 15 minutes with a GP and you can only treat one complaint.
It's so interesting how it's evolved over, I guess, the last few decades, and how life has changed completely, because a large part of this is also capitalism, right? The fact that it's so busy that doctors cannot attribute that more than 15 minutes to a patient. And I guess in that sense, we should really have a more preventive, proactive approach to our health, and looking at the multiple means or methods to be able to manage our health outside of just Western medicine, right?
Yeah, this is most important. The whole training process is to quickly identify, diagnose, and then give a pill. So what we have in the GP is a pill to an ill. You complain of headache, you get a tablet. You complain of knee pain, you get another tablet. So you end up with a bag full of tablets.
Yeah, it's so true.
But instead of that, if we look at the whole person and focus more on illness prevention or health promotion, and that is what is more lacking in our national health system.
And how did you use natural kind of preventive ways to go about your health for heart disease?
Yeah, because in an acute state and an immediate condition, when I saw things were going wrong for me, I had to do surgery.
Right.
And after surgery, I had to think back the way I am living, my lifestyle, the diet I take. I'm eating too much fat or too much sugar, too much salt. And these things attribute to, I'm eating more refined food. So I had to go back to wholemeal, brown bread, rice. It's no harm in eating. We don't take enough fiber within our. Fiber is very important to regulate the gut health and also to maintain our microbiome. Our long history of having antibiotics have changed a lot of people's gut bacteria.
Right.
Now, the gut bacteria is very, very important for our health because there is a symbiotic relationship with our bacteria. Then we feed them and they do some useful work for us where the body cannot do. By giving antibiotics, we wipe out all those gut bacteria, the good ones.
Yeah. And Doctor, did you use Ayurveda to help you manage your health after your surgery?
I used both medicines, chemical medicines as well as Ayurvedic medicine. But one thing is you should not mix the two together because they have different functions. There are different rates of absorption. Then one will interfere with the other. I use Ayurveda as a preventative medicine and chemical medicine as something for acute care, which is needed for that time to manage that situation. Once we got that under control, next step we need to think is how can we keep it down and prevent it getting any further or causing more damage or more risk. And this is where then you need to think of your food, you need to think of your lifestyle and how you manage or cope with your stress. Also, social relationships are very, very useful. We are getting more and more isolated.
Right.
So social interaction is very, very important. Or having a pet is a good way to interact. Opens a new
dimension of conversation and just interaction. Like it's literally food for your soul.
Coming back to that concept of body-mind connection.
So what would you say would be like 3 key takeaways for people who are either predisposed or, you know, might be in that situation, who already are being regulated through Western medicine with heart disease?
Take some time out for yourself.
Right.
Relax a little, sit back, give at least 5-10 minutes to de-stress, meditate, or do some yoga, or even exercise, and look at your nutrition. What you put into yourself. Are you putting wholesome food, or are you putting processed food? But it's how much we eat, when we eat, and this is more important than what we eat. We may eat the best food, but if that food is not properly digested and absorbed, and that is going to waste. And so concentrate on your diet.
So breathing and food. And what would be the last one that you would recommend for people?
Laugh.
Laughter?
Laugh as much as you can.
Oh,
that's so sweet.
But it's true. It's true.
With exercise, when you laugh, you get about 10 or 20 muscles are exercised in your face. When you don't laugh, you don't exercise any of them. When you laugh, it creates a lightness in your mind. When you're sad, you can't laugh.
Yeah.
So it's getting with people, interaction, social interaction. Develop a group. Talk to people.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
We can laugh and have fun.
Keep safe. Stay healthy. Be happy.
Oh.
These are my 3 takeaways.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This is
that's so sweet. And it's just a holistic way of living life.
Get back to your roots.
Yeah. Thank you for that. If you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and select that follow or subscribe button. For now, stay safe and we'll see you next week.